right, great people, good evening from wherever you're joining us from today, this wonderful evening. Welcome to our third day of the Youth for Climate Debates, and of course, what we are now branding as Changamkia Climate Debates, a conversation that is bringing young people across the country, the Republic of Kenya, here to talk about different issues on matters climate change. We've been here from day one. We were talking about climate change and communication, climate change communication. And the biggest question we're asking ourselves on that day, how is the information and communication generally about climate change done? We came back day two, which is a Tuesday yesterday, the 4th day of October, and we were talking about one of the most important issues, the issues of food security. And on this topic, quite a number of issues came up, the issues of the high cost of living, and it narrowed down to, and I remember someone saying, they have never seen people defending ugali as some people defended ugali on this platform yesterday. And of course, different questions came up. We hope also we'll be able to tackle these questions. So today on the day three, the third day of this great conversation, we are talking about climate change and energy. Tonight on the panel, I have four amazing speakers who will be introducing themselves shortly. I'm your host, of course, Opondo from Camp D Voices, but also just to let you know, our partners are here with us on board. That is the Hans Sedel Foundation and the Regional Sustainability Network, who have made it possible, possible for us to have this conversation for the past 2 days, today, and of course tomorrow, because we'll still be coming back with similar conversation. So straight, let me take this time now to welcome the wonderful speakers on this panel. They tell us briefly what their names, where they're joining us from, and why this conversation is important to them. Francis Omolo, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Franco Molo. I am a filmmaker and as well have background in technology, software programming majorly. And I'm joining this panel rather from Nairobi currently. Yeah.
Thank you, Omolo, joining the conversation from Nairobi. Next, let's go to Jeremy Atambo.
Thank you, Opondo. My name is Jeremy Atambo, as mentioned, and I am a graduate in international relations, peace and diplomacy issues. Why these conversations are important? I believe that all conversations are important, mainly because they do promote social change, they do develop these social norms, and can be deeply influential to all people involved. And there is also great need to localize these conversations because these are our daily occurrences in the topics of food, energy, and even politics, as we'll discuss. But thank you very much. Back to you, Pondo.
Asante sana Jeremy Atambo. Paul Muhisa.
Yeah, hi. My name is Paul Kitui. I'm joining the panel from Nairobi. I am a student at UON, law and anthropology, and I'm also a big climate enthusiast. I believe in the potential that has to be harnessed in regards to climate change initiatives. I believe there is a lot to do. Time is ticking, especially on our part as Africa, that we'll delve into later. Otherwise, I'm happy to join you today. Thank you. Back to you.
Asante sana karibu. Rosalind Omondi, the only lady on the panel tonight. Because day one, we had just one gentleman on the panel, so today looks like it's a men's affair, but there's a lady here with us on the panel. Karibu sana.
Hello, I'm Rosalind Omondi, currently a student at Mount Kenya University, Parklands Law Campus, studying law. And the reason I'm here today is because I've finally embraced the fact that climate change is a problem that we need to face. Initially, I used to be so I never liked the topic, to be honest, because I never saw the importance. But with time, I realized that everything that I was ignoring was going back to climate change. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm here to learn, and I'm here to also share what I know. Yes, thank you.
Asante sana. So that is Rosalind Omondi from MKU. Paul Muhisa from the University of Nairobi. You're not from? Paul?
Pardon? Yeah.
Which university are you representing?
Yeah, University of Nairobi,
Okay.
Parklands, specifically. Yeah.
Okay. Jeremy Atambo representing Daystar or Strathmore? Oh, data.
A little bit of both, but that's to be discussed later.
You've started behaving just the same way Kenyans behave when they're abroad. Every Kenyan always has something like a wristband. I mean, you can always tell that is a Kenyan every time you just see their wristband with the flag of Kenya. Francis Omolo representing the school of life,
Of
the
course.
filmmaker.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
but anyway, even before we get into the real conversation of the day, lady and gentlemen, may I ask, why did you get interested in this conversation about climate change and energy? Why not climate change and food security? Climate change communication? Why not climate change and politics at Ambo?
Right.
Okay. Well, this is a very crucial topic, Opondo, because it's the things we relate with in our day-to-day lives. When it comes to transport, the transport we use, what we use for cooking at home, what we use, to read and write, Opondo. These are things that affect us. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, energy is all around us. And they say in the universe, energy can neither be lost; it's just transferred. And I do believe that. It just depends on what kind of energy we're transferring and how we get this energy. So yeah, thank you very much.
What about you, Francis?
Well, energy, like our energy in to some extent is so intertwined with our economy. Like everything our economy has in the country is so much dependent on energy. A slight change in our energy sector, that's number one, means like there's a slight change in the day-to-day living of every human being that lives in this country. So I was so interested in this particular sector because it's very crucial. Now we are heading towards a green revolution in energy, and as a nation, we have this economy that's so dependent on energy in whichever form, electricity, crude oil, whichever, is so dependent on energy that whatever change that happens to it, like for example, oil rises with 1 shilling, then the cost of living in our country definitely rises to some extent. So I was so keen to join this conversation based on this particular aspect, getting to discuss exactly like how is it that now that the world is moving towards a green energy industry, how is it that we're going to mitigate ourselves, like we're going to organize ourselves to plug into this revolution, as well as ensuring that in our transition, we also ensure that the energy that we use is also sustainable for our economy.
Hmm. How about you,
Yeah.
Paul? Why interested in this conversation?
Well, any topic that has to do with climate change is important in itself, but I chose energy particularly because I believe that this is where it all started. I mean, people can argue climate change has been there for like millennia, but of course, the process of climate change has been expedited in the past maybe 150 years because of the changes in the way people used energy or use energy to create products. So, if we're going to mitigate or alleviate the conditions that we're in right now, the fundamental changes are going to start in regards to energy itself and how we can channel or how we can be innovative in channeling um, how we use energy in different ways or regards. So it starts with energy basically. Yeah.
Okay. And Omukoko Kothi is saying there's a lot of energy on this panel. Rosie, why are you interested in this conversation?
I'm interested on this conversation because, as I said earlier, at first I used to be so obstinate about climate change. So, looking at climate change and energy, this is like the root. And anytime we're trying to uproot a problem, I currently view climate change as a weed like an unwanted plant, not the weed you've come to know as an unwanted plant. So, looking at climate change as a weed that should be uprooted, we should start from the roots. And for me, energy is the root. If we uproot climate change from energy, when we start from energy coming upwards, then we'll be able to solve um, more problems, and maybe it will even be faster if we start with energy, because as energy translates to power, so the power we begin with is the power we're going to use to crush climate change as a problem. Yes, thank you.
Mhm. Wonderful. And of course, just to remind everyone who is watching, in case you're just joining us right now, the conversation is live here on Camp D Voices YouTube channel and also on our Facebook page. Remember, this conversation is brought to you by Camp D Voices in very, very, very strong partnership with RSN, that is the Regional Sustainability Network, and Hans Seidel Foundation. The speakers on the panel tonight: Francis Omolo, Jeremy Atambo, Paul Mohisa, and Omondi Rosin, all are young Kenyans interested in this matter that we're talking about. We are not experts because we've said severally that this conversation can no longer be left to the experts or to the government officials alone, because we have to be part of this whole conversation. Just to conduct a quick roll call, Francis Omolo, where you are right now, how did you get to work or to school today?
I took a vehicle actually. I took a bike and a vehicle to get to where I am, basically.
By bike, what do you mean? You know, in Kenya, when you talk about bike, is it a bicycle, okada, boda boda, or a
A
bicycle?
boda boda.
A boda
A
boda.
boda boda. No, yes, boda boda.
An electric one?
Not electric. It's a diesel powered, I think, petroleum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeremy, how did you get where you are? We've not left your house today.
If I say, you won't believe me, but I walked to school. I chose to walk because it is in close proximity to where I reside. Yes.
Is it because you could not afford to use energy, or you had your own energy?
I did have my own energy. I had eaten well, and I decided to walk. Yes.
Okay, so today you walked to school. Rosie Omondi?
Okay, today I used two means of transport to get to where I am. I used the Futsubishi, that is, I walked, yeah, get to where I am. And I also used a Matatu today, that is the public service vehicle.
Okay, probably an electric one?
Not really. I wish. It's just that it's not available in my route. Maybe I would have
Oh,
explored it already. Yeah.
okay, fine. Paul Muhisa?
Well, I might veer from everyone else by saying I did not leave the house today. Uh, my engagements were mainly in the house, just a brief stroll outside, but I channeled my energy to my lunch and breakfast and dinner in a little bit. So maybe we'll be using that tomorrow.
So leo kazi ni kukula tu na kurelax, kukula tu na kurelax.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
Energy
but
reserve.
yes, also one important thing also that people need to know, that we're having this conversation because COP is just around the corner. And we'll be telling people shortly what COP is all about. But remember, you can follow this conversation on Twitter. Changamkia Climate is the hashtag. Changamkia, if you are Kenyan, you know what you're talking about. Changamka, yani do something, rise up, take action, do something. That's what actually we're talking about, or Youth for Climate. That's the other hashtag. You can follow this conversation on Twitter, on our page, Camp D Voices. You can also follow on YouTube and on Facebook. Same name, Camp D Voices, the one that are streaming down here. Jeremy Atambo, COP is happening in Africa. Is it COP in Africa or is it COP Africa?
This, I believe, is COP in Africa, although I wish it was COP Africa. There's a clear distinction between the two. COP is just, a summit that's brought, different parties together from around the world, mainly to accelerate, action just towards the goals of various climate agreements that we've had in the past. Because now we've admitted that it's a climate crisis and we need to do something. However, what we need to do is action. And particularly because it's in Egypt, Africa, I hope we do address this African issues in regards climate. But again, I fear this might not be addressed as the prior COPs in Glasgow. So back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And maybe Atambo, for someone who might be listening right now and wondering what is COP, we can't just make assumptions. What is COP?
Okay, COP. COP is an acronym which stands for Conference of Parties. This is where different delegations of the world do, converge and meet. This is mainly towards the end of the year. This year it will be happening in November, the beginning of November, and they do meet and discuss issues climate change. the issues that affect us when it comes to food, energy, anything, climate change. We meet, we discuss, and then we look for amicable solutions to solve these issues. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Francis, if I may ask, when is the first time you heard of the word COP or you ever interacted with this conversation around COP?
Well, the first time was somewhere around 2015. That was the first time I interacted with the word COP.
Mhm.
And I can say it's majorly because I was in the debate club, and that's when I started reading about all these issues that are happening in the world because I wanted to do research. So that's the first time that I came across COP, basically. Yeah.
Okay, Rosie Omondi?
Okay, the first time I came across COP was this year actually, and it's
Mhm.
because I finally decided to embrace this topic called climate change. I've been a
Mhm.
debater most of my life, but there's this topic on climate, I've been evading it because I was like, I'm not really feeling the impact, but I really didn't know that everything that I'm going through is because of the climate change. So I got to interact with COP this year.
How about Paul?
Uh, well, the first thing I had anything COP related was when I was watching their speeches last year. Particularly, I remember Barack Obama's speeches in Glasgow about COP. But in regards to delving explicitly to the topic and know what it really entails, like to the detail, that was this year. Uh, I'm doing the thing, or we're organizing a few things for COP with a few friends here and there. So they actually taught me a lot, and I'm still learning. So I would say, as a concept, shallow on a shallow level last year, but really explicitly this year.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Thank you. For everyone who is watching us, actually, this is the root for this conversation that we are talking about. We decided to bring this conversation because COP is happening in Africa and we want our voices to be heard. What we think about food production, availability, distribution, what we think about the energy we are using and its effect, or even the effect of climate change actually on the energy that we are using. What we think our leaders need to do about this whole topic and how people need to be engaged. That is why we're having this conversation here tonight. So, straight to the first question of the day. Actually, we are still just ice breaking and letting people know what we're discussing and why this conversation is important now. What are some of the most common sources of energy that we use in our daily lives? And how do these sources of energy affect our climate or just affect our environment as a whole? At home, you cook. At home, probably you're using light, you study, you process certain things, and all that. What are some of the most common sources of energy at your places? Rural, Nairobi, the capital where you live in Mombasa, or in Kakamega, Kisumu. Francis Omolo, start us off.
Right. So, on a personal, I've lived in Kibera for the longest time, and the sources of energy that I have used actually range in different forms when it comes to transport and in domestic use. So when it comes to domestic use, back then when I was a younger boy, we used to use a lot of charcoal and a lot of kerosene to light up the house, to cook the food, to warm up everything, and due to probably health complications we moved from using charcoal, now we're using liquid petroleum gas for our day-to-day cooking and such. But still getting to look at my neighbors and everybody who was surrounding me, you still find most people are still using charcoal as a means of cooking, and some of the vendors who are cooking food for sale are using charcoal as well as firewood.
Okay, okay. Do you think that has any effect on the health of people around, the effect on on climate?
Yes, to some extent, there is some effect on the climate. Number one, there is this because, like I've mentioned, I've lived in Kibera for a while. There is this part in Kibera and the farthest end close to this forest, Ngong Forest. Back then, it used to be, lush. It has like a significant cover, forest cover, but the demand for firewood increased gradually based on the fact that people constantly want to cook things, want to become vendors so that they can, do businesses for themselves. That you find people started fetching firewood from this particular place. So you find that this particular forest cover receded. with time. And also, when you come to think of health on a personal basis, the reason why we shifted from charcoal to using liquid petroleum gas is because I started developing, breathing complications and such. So some of the biggest impact that these particular sources of energy that we use in our houses have, health repercussions as well as climatic repercussions. But the degree when it comes to, the climatic repercussions may actually be debatable. Judge when you compare to other, nations, the degree with other, areas that we get to use energy. Back to you, Pondo.
Thank you. Jeremy Tambo, on the same question.
Okay, some notable sources of energy I've seen the use of LPG gas around my area, use of electricity, and also, sadly, the use of charcoal. You see, the thing about Kenyans is that we are heavily reliant on these carbon-based fuels, and we tend to use them on our day-to-day lives. And 80%, I read somewhere that 80% of all energy that's used in this region alone hails from biomass. And what do I mean by biomass? This is just simply a plant-based material that's used as fuel. This can be wood, this can be charcoal, and this can be domestic waste. Again, why? Because many Kenyans around my area and any other area, find it cheaper and more reliable to use this this biomass as compared to other modern alternatives. And I won't lie, when the LPG gas ends in the middle of the night, and we haven't cooked our ugali, we haven't cooked our fish, we haven't cooked our chicken, we'll opt for charcoal. And there's also that taste that charcoal kuku which has been cooked by charcoal. It tastes better. That's what
Yeah.
many assume. And but this reminds me of an elderly man that's actually just next to our local vibandas, who has been selling charcoal there for, he said, over 20 years. And this man, he hails from Kangware, and he wakes up every day at 5 a.m. and walks down all the way just to sell charcoal every morning. And he leaves at 8 p.m. every evening, every day, even on Sundays, because this is his source of income. And I didn't want to bring the economic aspect into this, but this is his daily living. So when you say that charcoal is bad, it chokes you, it produces carbon monoxide, he doesn't understand it. It will be hard to convince him to phase out this charcoal. Why? Because this is the charcoal that took his children to school. That's the charcoal that's paying his rent. It might be hard to convince him, but I don't believe it's impossible. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Atambo, maybe if we can just discuss a little bit, because I've had these things severally that ugali or chicken or fish cooked on firewood or on charcoal tastes so differently from gas. Rosie, do you think that that's the case?
It's true. It's true. Okay, I come from Kisumu, and so I have my grandparents' place. So mostly at our place, at our home, we don't use charcoal or even wood. But if we go to my grandparents' place, we end up using wood or charcoal most of the time. Okay, though not so much of late, but yeah. So there's a difference in taste. There's a difference. Even if you've been in Nairobi for long, then you go back home. Trust me, there's a way chicken from Nairobi tastes different from chicken made at home. Even if you bring the one from home and come and make it in Nairobi, the taste will still be different. So it's true. There's a difference in taste.
A really big difference. I concur, especially ugali. Nasikia tamu
Yeah.
lingine ugali, especially.
Okay.
No, kuku kienyeji. We have kuku. Let's go to the chicken. The chicken, the ones from home. At home, they
So,
taste
so
different. When you bring
you
them to
believe it
Nairobi,
is because of the source of energy being used?
yes, I strongly believe that.
Moisa, do you believe so?
I don't know
Or
because
you've not
the whole
tested the one from the countryside?
okay, I've eaten food from shags, of course, but like the whole sort of narrative of like firewood cooked food being, sweeter than, the kawaida LPG, whatever. I'm just learning right now. I didn't know. But what I would say is that yeah, there's maybe the argument because there's more intensity in some of these things. So yeah, maybe it's true, but
Oh, no,
I don't.
Let's bring
Okay.
it to something close. Like, do you know the difference between chips muitu, the fries that we buy that are made at the roadside? Then there are those we buy that are made using electricity. There is always a difference in taste. That one you can attest to, unless you don't eat fries.
Okay, so so but anyway, that is okay. So we've spoken about the energy mostly that we use for cooking. How about transport? Because maybe I also want us to touch on that a bit. The energy that is used in transportation, the energy that is even used in the industries, which are some of the most common, and how do these affect our climate? Jeremy?
Okay, again, I think it will depend on where you live. I got to learn juicy actually. That was a few days ago that there are people who actually, they use sea transportation or they use water transportation in their day-to-day lives. And many people have been saying that, that the seas have been becoming crazier. That there's been a lot of flooding of late. There's been a sea level, a rise, there are storms. It just rains out of nowhere. And this affects the day-to-day operation. This affects their transportation because of the flooding, their fish. Road transportation, on the other hand, um, I think many Kenyans are opting to fly matatus as opposed to back then, and we need to ask ourselves why. I believe because this is because of the greenhouse effect. These pockets of carbon dioxide that are produced from cows, from humans, from our human activities. They refuse to leave the atmosphere, and they make our cities hotter. So that short distance you would have walked, from here till the market or from here till town, you'll opt to use a matatu because it gets very hot, and that's one of the instances I see. But there's a heavy reliance on the use of diesel engines. There's a heavy reliance on the use of petroleum, and we in as much as we see the introduction of these electric vehicles to our cities, it's not to a preferable scale. We still get choked by these matatus, these guzzlers. They say nganya. These nganyas, they choke us because of all the smokes that because of the badly maintained. And I think it's time for change. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's time for change. Mhm.
Omolo, do you think there are better alternatives, sources of energy for transport?
Of course, there are better sources. Like we have alternatives for transport. Like for example, when you decide to go EV, totally EV, like electric with our vehicles, it's very sustainable and it's very clean. And we get to see that using electric vehicles is more efficient compared to using internal combustion engine. Even when you speak technically, when it comes to physics, electric engines are better than internal combustion engines, right? They're cheaper to maintain, they are more efficient and such. So alternatives are there only when we invest much into the alternatives, because currently we still so much reliant on internal combustion engines in our public transport. The people who can't afford cars use public transport, like the Nganyas, the motorbikes and such. And people who are in the middle class who are able to finance for a vehicle, you find so many people are buying vehicles which are still internal combustion, just because they don't want to be part of the public transport, which actually adds up to the pollution that our transport sector gives. So alternatives are there. They are there, and we've seen in the world markets alternatives are there, and so many other countries are embracing these alternatives. But the challenge we have as our country currently is we lack so many things. We probably lack policies, we lack probably infrastructure, and even the willingness maybe for motorists to take up EV vehicles. Back to
Mhm.
your Pondo. Yeah.
Wonderful. Paul, yes, Paul?
Yeah, what Frank said was interesting because yes, it is true that there is a reluctance. So let's say you're middle class, you've saved up some money for a few years, you're now ready for a car, like you want to upgrade from a Mat. Yeah, you probably will. But there are two sides to that. I think you can upgrade because you don't want to like do Mats and whatever, but also the cost itself of investing in an EV for many people, it doesn't resonate well with many people, and it's not just like in Kenya. Okay, in Kenya you have companies like Rome Motors or Opibus. Like I have a cousin who works there, and they tell me that for you to switch a simple engine from combustible to electric is like you might even need up to 4 million shillings. It's not that like easy in as much as there is need to do it. Even in the States, I know we want to localize this discourse, but in the States, a Tesla is still seen as a status symbol. It's not like something that's accessible to everyone. So there is that in terms of transitioning, but I think there is need to make people comprehend the long-term effect of this, not only to the environment and all that, but also to themselves. Because, like we've talked about gases and all that, yes, LPGs are a good alternative, although like compared to charcoal, that is, but within gas themselves, you have LPGs, then you have the natural gas itself. LPG is considered to be slightly more dangerous to the environment, even though it's negligible, but people just use it because it's safe, and it's also cheaper, like way cheaper than natural gas when it comes to costs and maintenance. So I think it's a balance of the two, because some people are more than willing to do it, but also I think there is a lack of comprehension on how it will benefit them in the long term, because a lot of the opinion is really short term based. So we can expedite this process, I believe, by having a more tech literate, or rather climatic literate, public in regards to this, like it is in the first world. I think that will do a lot.
Mm-hmm. Rose, would you like to add something on this before we move to the next round? Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what I'd like to add, I'd just like to concur with what Paul is saying on us having a more climate literate, or rather even energy literate society, because it's so hard to start explaining to someone how they can just move from a, a diesel engine vehicle to an electric engine vehicle. Yet these are only things they see in movies and news, and even if they're brought to the public, to us, we'd feel like it's going to take more time, it's going to be more costly, and plus, even to date, you can realize that at times, even if you're in a matatu, or rather you're on the road and you hear the stench, or rather the gas that's being emitted from the diesel engined cars, there are people who will be complaining, but there are people who will be so okay with it. They're like, they'll even consider you to be having a specific status, or say, huyu anaringa. They'll be like, you're like showing off. You're saying that there's the smell from the engines are affecting you. So we still need to promote the climate literacy first before we can even take other steps on the energy spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that is interesting because there's a conversation that has been here since yesterday. And I see a Tambo lifting his hand up, but even before Tambo, I bring you in. There's been a conversation on lack of information. That there's so many people would like to participate, but they do not really know how to. They don't. They lack the information. They lack how the communication is done. Sometimes not really effective. So, for example, when Omukoko says that he was in Bungoma, and it seems there are more motorbikes in Bungoma than people. I know this on a lighter note, but definitely we know what he means. I bet this causes immense air pollution. What can we do to minimize and do the pollution without starting a war? All these statements actually make a lot of sense. How then do you regulate a sector without starting a war in terms of regulation, in terms of introducing better ways of transport, especially when Mkoko talks about motorbikes being more than people? Uh, it is an interesting conversation. It's a question between we're talking now between the economic activities of the people and the future and our health and everything. So, Rosie, when you talked about chicken cooked on firewood or on charcoal tasting sweeter than this other one. The big question here that the big thing that we must know that the green energy revolution is inevitable and something must be done. Natambo, before I bring in the next question, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I did want to answer Mukoko's question,
Mhm.
and also raise something about industrial production of energy, as the question dictated. So for Mukoko's question, I do believe that the alternatives, if you go to I think the Total at Hurlingham, there's a company that has partnered with Total. It's called Ampersand. And what they do is that they provide, that's a charging station, first of all, and they do provide an alternative for these Ndudi or motorbike users. If you want to buy or if you want to opt into the electrical space, you can purchase a motorbike via hire purchase, and they will charge for you, I think, for free up to 25 times. And I think that's a good initiative, but there is a clear lack of information as to access these opportunities. Secondly, when it comes to this energy transition, as you've mentioned, this is just an ongoing process, of replacing our fossil fuels, the ones we use on a day-to-day basis, and now with low carbon emitting energy sources. I believe that we need to involve the community, the major stakeholders, when it comes to the topic of energy transition, because now we need to inform them that there are other sources of energy, for other renewable sources like solar, like wind, like carbon smart energy sources. The only problem comes in communication and the implementation, because as I mentioned earlier, they find these alternatives to be cheaper and to be also more reliable. Thank you very much.
Paul, you want to react to that before we go?
No, I think not. I largely agree with what he says. I think it's just a matter of showing them that there is a future post such a profound change, because people always fear change because of what it will do to their livelihoods. So if the guys know that there is a way they can help the environment and properly comprehend the greater cause and the effects while still able to keep their livelihood, I think that will go a long way. But we are doing well, Kenya, so far. We'll get into that later. But yeah, thanks.
Mm. We're doing well, but we can do better. So, Atambo, you are among the people, some of the people that I know have really interacted with students, even in primary and secondary schools. You know what most Kenyan schools still use, even for in most of the school in preparing meals, especially the school kitchen. What do you think if right now there's a school principal listening, watching, a student listening and watching, or the education stakeholders, what can we recommend to them to use as better alternatives right now? I know they know, but definitely we have to keep emphasizing on this.
Um, maybe if you could just come again, Opondo. I don't think I've grasped your question quite all right. If that's okay.
Okay, what I'm asking, being someone who has also really interacted with schools and children, you visit schools, you see what is happening there. Most schools, actually, especially in rural areas, and even here in Nairobi, people still use charcoal and firewood. What do you think would be better alternatives? Because sometimes they say, because the population is huge, electricity is unreliable, gas is expensive. What could be the better alternative, and what should the government do to make sure that these alternatives are affordable?
Um, that's a difficult question, Upondo. I won't lie, but again, I believe that as I'll reiterate, communities are considered, to be major stakeholders in this transition, and there's only if we have proper engagement and proper compliance will they change. Because these carbon-based fuels or these biomass fuels, such as makaa and firewood and kerosene, again, we use them because they're reliable. But if a school could use, if they could use biogas, that's from waste, from their farm, from their school farm. If they could use biogas instead, the problem with biogas is that, installing it is quite expensive, even maintenance, but it's cheaper in the long run. It's more efficient. It's safer in the long run, as opposed to using, firewood and even kerosene. If they could opt for LPG, if the government could subsidize the sale of these LPG gases to these schools and other institutions, if they could partner with NGOs, to ensure a smooth energy transition, that would be a good thing. Also, if they could adopt climate-friendly patterns, and I can't stress that enough. If they could adopt energy-friendly patterns, only then will we, as a system or even as a country, only then will we see qualitative and quantitative improvements to our energy system.
Mhm. Okay. Wonderful. Paul, maybe what would you like to say on that?
Yeah, I think when you just go and bombard schools like my high school, I remember I used to go to the kitchen sometimes and I look at how they cook. There was like a huge like stove with firewood at the bottom, and this was food that was feeding thousands at a go. So I think just going and telling them to switch it up very quickly is it's a good cause. The intention is definitely okay, but also realistically speaking, you need to be pragmatic in the way you approach this. Uh, Not saying that we are not making progress, but yeah, I think a gradual shift, maybe like Atambo has said, subsidize LPGs and maybe make them understand that it might be a hefty investment at the start, but in the long run, like let them think, 5, 10 years, like the myriad of possibilities it has in regards to expediting the process of improving our climate situation. I think that will be okay.
Mm-hmm. Omolo, on the same?
Um, I think the most viable solution for institutions like school, which actually takes care of so many students and so many people so that they can be cooked for, is what Atambo had already mentioned, biogas. That is the one viable solution that I see that is carbon neutral, that schools can adopt and it can be sustainable for, our institutions as we are. It's okay to subsidize LPG, but for how long will you be subsidizing LPG? Is it sustainable in the long run? Will the government keep on subsidizing LPG for schools to keep on cooking for the students? My thinking when it comes to biogas, yes, Atambo already mentioned it's expensive to set up, but in the long run you find that you already have whatever you need to produce the gas that you need to cook for the students. When you think about redesigning how you collect the waste in the school, probably from the farm or even from the students themselves, and you have biogas within the schools, yes, it's expensive to set up, right? But once it's set up, think about it, you already have fuel for as long as students come to school. You don't need to rely on the government to bring you LPG, right? It may be scary for the finances of various schools, but if any principal will be listening to this, I would say think about it and think of how you can finance setting up or designing such kind of a system where you're able to harness whatever that is natural, to use the natural gases so that you can cook for thousands of students, because some schools have thousands of students, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is my thinking. Invest for institutions like schools, invest so much in biogas for as long as because right now we are not yet into technology such as hydrogen fuels or something. Biogas is the most affordable carbon neutral option we have.
Okay. Francis Omolo, you were in a school, Olympic High School, checking on your
Yes.
profile. What was
Yes.
the population of your school when you were in high school?
It was above in high school. It was above 1,500.
Okay. Jeremy Atambo in Juja Preparatory School, how many were you when you were in your final year?
The whole school, I can tell you the population of the whole school was not more than 250 students.
Okay. Rosemary Omondi, girls, I met you as a student leader, some of the most influential leaders in high school. About close to 2,000 students, right?
Yes, yes, close to 2000.
Okay. Paul Muhisa in Kakamega High School, how many were you?
Yeah, about 2000 as well. Yeah,
Okay.
that's accurate.
Maybe to Omondi and Paul, how practical do you think the suggestions we are giving here are? Because you were prefects in your schools and you really understood how the schools were running. How practical is it? And maybe if something can be done, where can the government come in and the different stakeholders?
Okay. Firstly, I'd go with we'd need to work together, and that will mean that we include, leave alone the government first. We'd need to go to the parents first, and before we get to the parents, we'll need to talk to the community. That is okay. From I'm talking from a point of where my school was located. Buteri Girls is located among a community. So like our environment is a community, so we need to consult with them in most things that we do, so that they can be part of it, they can assist where they can, and there are things that if we want to implement, they'd say no. So if we start from the grassroots, that is, as I've said, the community, then we involve the parents, then finally we talk to the students and tell them why are we doing this. Because for us, okay, our school was so democratic, most of the decisions made, we were all involved. So before it gets to where something is being implemented, if not all the students knew, but at least the student leaders knew. So I always say there's nothing impossible as long as communication is involved. The fact that we can communicate and talk as a group, or specific individuals within an institution, or even an area, there's nothing that cannot take place. But this thing of just shifting, just coming up with something, let's say as an administrator, you just wake up and decide, you know what, we've been using firewood for some time, but we feel like it's not well, or it's not good for your health, or it's not helping us so much. It will be hard to implement because other people are not involved. So I just believe that there's nothing impossible as long as we start with communication and discussion. Yes, it can be implemented.
Paul Muisa, on the same?
Yeah, so yeah, communication discussion. I would also add to that maybe comprehension, and I mean comprehension on both parties. So yeah, it's multifaceted. Like the students and not really the students, but the like the principals and all that, and the board of management or whoever is in charge, they need to understand why you want to take on such a cause. But on their side, on your side, you also need to understand why exactly you expect some friction in regards to seeing a transition, because like you said again, to go and simply switch everything up is not, and expect like a utopic, perfect kind of result system is not practical, because two reasons. Number one, of course it will disrupt a lot of the economic whatevers, and as of now, with the economy and everything, people don't want to waste money, or like people don't want to experiment in something that might not actually happen. The budgets are already tight, and you can see how the government is. The second thing is getting people to understand that it's a cause like bigger for themselves. For most people, it's like, I'm here, I'm employed, I'm doing my job, I've not broken any rules, so sijaumiza mtu. The climate thing, I don't care. Others will say it's a hoax, that they don't believe in it. It's like a political tool or whatever. So it's it goes a long way, but when you can also show concrete evidence or concrete proof of what's actually happening, I think that will go a long way, like kind of displaying to them what is at stake or what has happened so far. Because if you go there, you'll just be gearing Mbuzi guitar. When you go and tell them there is climate change, someone will probably say, I've heard of it, but is it really credible? Because it's something they say on these conferences, and like how litigating these processes are, like litigation and everything, bureaucracy rather. It's a lot of formality and paperwork and no practicality. So yeah, I think it's about also showing concrete, like what's at stake. If
Mhm.
now sort of trickle down to the simplest ways that can be fed into those schools, and not like the complex language you use in these conferences and these scopes and whatever. Yeah.
Mhm. I like that because you are saying that let us bring the community. It's not just a matter of Opondo or Paul or Rosie, Atambo or Francis or Handsidle Foundation or Camp D or the RSN coming on board and saying, you know what, from today onward, this is what you have to use. On day one, actually, we were challenged here that this conversation is conversation that must be taken to the people. We have now to take this conversation out of the boardrooms and go to the communities where the actual things are happening. Vincent Fortuna is saying if the transition to electrical cars or e-fuels is too big for a challenge to target, maybe it would be also good to keep an eye on reducing the carbon footprint of Kenya with sustainable forestry. You know, I like this because now we are all coming up with some revolutionary ideas. And there was Stephen Mukoko who was also asking, Mamboga uses firewood to cook. It is cheap, easily available, and makes ugali taste like ugali. You know, when an African or when a Kenyan says ugali tastes like ugali, you know what they mean. When I say that githeri must taste like githeri or chicken must taste like chicken, the exact thing that we were saying when we began. So he's actually is asking, what is your message to Mamboga? We'll get back to that later. Steve will definitely answer you. We'll definitely respond to that question. Now, my next question to you, everyone who is watching, and even to those on this panel here, Africa. I mean, the transition to a green energy, something that is so inevitable. At this point in time, how do you think we should be preparing for this? Because we like it or not, something must be done. Whether we like it or not, something must be done. Uh, how we cook our food, how we go to work, how we study. Already we've seen the health implications. We've seen the destruction that is caused actually just to general environment. How should we then be preparing for this? Other countries are preparing. How should Kenya, how should our communities be preparing for this? Francis Omolo.
Right. I would say when it comes to preparation to this green energy revolution, which is inevitable, number one, communities should understand without jumping into this revolution, we stand a chance at being marginalized from the rest of the world. So the thing is, if you don't switch like with the world to using green energy, so economically, you'll be like an outcast and you'll be left out to some degree. Secondly, as much as we know that this transition it comes with its very own cost. Like for example, Paul Kitui already mentioned that a cousin of his gave him a quote of switching from combustion engine to electric engine, costing around 4 million shillings, which is the price of a new vehicle. Basically, there is the cost, right? There is the cost of switching to green energy, but it's the price to pay. So. What I would say, sorry, what I would say is it is inevitable that we switch. We have to understand that the economic, we have to, switch for economic reasons. And sorry, come up with the question again.
No, no, actually, what I was asking, what should we
Yeah.
be doing? How should we be preparing
So
for this?
what should be doing is as a community, as individuals, as businesses, as the government, all around we should focus more on investing on these alternative options, and we should be open-minded towards the options that are actually coming along and various innovations that are coming along when it comes to green energy fuels. For example, currently when even before, like, it's kind of like answering whatever Coco posed when it comes to Mama Mboga using charcoal and what alternative should use. We have companies that already offer options like ethanol fuel, which is carbon neutral to some extent. We have companies that are offering solutions towards biogas, which is also carbon neutral. And as Vincent Fortner mentioned, the transition, when you do like a sudden transition, definitely it's gonna be very hard. But then when it comes to gradual transition from reducing our carbon footprints, meaning that we invest as a people, we get to look at these options that are available currently in our country. As business people, we get to see this and we start investing in this particular solution, so that we jump on board on this particular revolution, so that we get to move towards a green country. Yeah, basically. Back to you,
Atambo?
Pondo.
So they have much to say, and the thing about me is I'll always reiterate my points. So first of all, this energy transition is not an event; it's a process.
Yeah.
And what we need as Africa is a holistic approach. Approach which begins from the grassroots level, as Ruto will say, bottom up, all the way till the topmost government official, that is the president who's seated at his office, who has nothing to worry about when it comes to the energy system. And we need an energy system, that is centered on renewable energy. an energy system, that can help resolve many of Africa's social, many of Africa's economic, health, and even environmental challenges. A profound energy transition is not only feasible, but it is very essential, for a climate-safe future in which now sustainable development prerogatives are met. And by sustainable development, I'll just put it in the simplest way. This is just development that meets the needs of the present, without at all compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. This will directly or indirectly answer Vincent's question on forestry. We need these forests. There are carbon sinks. They will help us in the future. But it is only when we adopt these energy or climate friendly patterns to our day to day lives. If I do ask the panel here, how many of you at your own capacity at home or at your workspaces, how many of you, want, or how many of you practice recycling, at home? How many of you have different dustbins, set aside, or different areas set aside where you throw your plastics, where you throw your organic waste, where you throw your paper? I know it's close to none because we do opt for comfortability rather than doing the right thing. And now I'll just ask, or rather, I'll answer the most important question: why is this transition important? Firstly, in our globalized world, we see that wind and solar are actually our fastest growing renewables. If you can see I think it's a wind plant in northern Kenya. If you can see solar, if you just put solar panels in just a quarter of the Sahara Desert, it will provide electricity to the whole world. Renewables are considered to be carbon smart and carbon friendly energy sources, and in fact are becoming cheaper. It depends. Are we ready to adopt them at a community level? And when the community is involved, the investors are involved. And when the investors are involved, the government is immediately involved. And now they will, shape these policymakers to advocate for a climate-friendly future. But just before I go, I just want to mention two things. There's some statistics I saw about Kenya. Kenya still remains one of the world's most expensive electricity sellers. And before the implementation, I think it was earlier this year, of the 15% reduction in electricity tariffs, across the country. This was around Jamhuri. The cost of electricity was about $0.2 per kilowatt. That was about 24 bob, 24 Kenya shillings, as compared to the global average of 0.13, that's 15 bob. That's for households, and 0.17, that's 18 bob per kilowatt for commercial uses. Why is that? It's because our policymakers are not interested in providing amicable solutions, African solutions to solve our African problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Atambo. And maybe the question you asked, should I ask it to the panelists?
You should, please do.
Yeah, okay, but okay. It's also just my hope that all of us who are coming to this panel, and even those listening and watching, if there are certain things you've been doing and right now you are learning, all of a sudden they are wrong, I think it's just time to stop. Because somebody asked on Monday that can one voice help on anything? Can one person's action even help? But then you realize that the moment we are one person is in different places, then we might just realize later on that we are a whole world practicing something. So it may be time now to take that direction that Atambu is talking about. Omukoko says, let me bring his comment in front of us here. So Mkoko says Africa wants to develop its manufacturing industries which largely use fossil fuels. Should Africa shelve its development ambitions? What should it do? Atambo, you're nodding. Moise, would you like to respond to this, or Rosie or Omolo?
Yeah, sure. I can respond to that. I
Yes.
think our friend and brother Mukoko is probably the most Pan-African of all of us here. We constantly see the content he puts out, so you understand where he comes from. Yeah, so Africa is very mineral rich. That is, to put it lightly. There is room for growth, and especially now with the continual awakening of like what happened or the injustices that have been committed, there is a rising zeal by Africans to make products for Africa and by Africa. So there is the aspect of, yeah, we need to use what we've always had now to benefit ourselves without being pillaged by the West and all that. But then again, we have to look at utility in that regard, because Africa has emitted least so far, and like where we are positioned, like especially here Kenya and DRC and whatever closer to the equator, we are experiencing the worst of it in the world. So it's about utility in that particular instance. But what I will say is that Africa is also richest in terms of the potential for renewables. As Atambo had said, you put these things in the Sahara, it can provide electricity for the whole world. That is true. I also saw Morocco, a country like Morocco, for example, is a country that relies heavily on like solar energy. It's not been utilized to its entirety. There's a long way to go, but like it experiences Africa in on average experiences like I think 117% more sun than Germany, which is also another very industrialized country in Europe. So we can be just as competitive in regards to energy production, but we can also approach it in a different way in terms of leading the conversation in climate change. And it doesn't matter like kind of okay, it matters to some regard, but for the sake of our children and our grandchildren, we need to be the ones who are most concerned. Because if we say we want to compete with the West and we need reparations and historical injustices and all that, then if it's harming us more, or we cannot mitigate what we're experiencing right now, then what will be the point? There won't be any existence that will survive to reap the fruits of that labor via the fossil fuels and energy produced in that regard. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I hope that Mkoko has gotten that. But let me maybe just this would be a rather reckless question, but I think it's just important to bring it. We brought it on Monday yesterday. Atambo, Francis, Omondi, and Muisa. Africa has bigger problems than climate change. Do you believe so? We have problems with education, corruption, poverty. Why should climate change be part of our worries? Jeremy,
I'd
yes, Mondi.
okay, I'd like to go first. Okay, yes, we have many problems, like many, even to a personal level, you're affected by the many problems that we have around us. But one thing I've come to realize with Africa, like for us to get a solution, we go through a process. I'd like to start. The first one has to be lamentation. We have to complain. We have to hear complaints from all around. I'd go with how we perceived COVID-19, how we treated it. That's the same way we are treating climate change. It's just that it's not yet, it has not yet like hit us that much as the way COVID hit us. So we lament a lot. Um, After we've lamented and we've seen that it's really affecting all of us, that's when we start preparation. We start preparation after lamentations. So we waste time in between finding a solution and starting the process from the lamentation part all down to where we are going to find the solution. So when we say that we have bigger problems, it's because those are the problems that we hear every day. Those are the problems that the lamentation part is on the move. But if climate change, we feel like climate change has not yet gotten to that part. So yes, we have bigger problems only because they are on the lamentation part. And by the time they'll get to the solution part, it's a whole process. So because climate change has not yet been lamented about, it has not, we're not even preparing that much, because we need to see someone. You remember during COVID how we were like, do you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who has COVID? So you might tell someone about climate change and they're like, Do you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who is really being affected by climate change? You see, because you can never accept that you're the one who's being affected. It has to go through a process, and that's the problem. So I'd like to say that we should try avoid the lamentation part and just
Okay.
jump into the preparation of everything so that we can have a fermentation. You remember? Oh, okay, let me just take us back to, I don't know if most of us here have tasted that fermented porridge. Opondo, can you relate? How
Why
at
must
first
it
when
be
you,
Opondo? Why must
because
Opondo can
I've
relate to
seen
that?
you, I've seen an image of you with porridge, so yes, it's okay.
Okay.
So let's stop. We should digress from the lamentation part and let's just get to the preparation so that it can ease in the solution. Because if we are always lamenting and we're not fermenting anything, by the end of the day, we are never going to be having solutions,
Okay.
or rather, we are never going to be making any steps. So, yes, we have bigger problems, but it's just that they are the problems we are seeing. We are at the lamenting part. Yes.
Atambo, it seems you have something burning deep inside you.
I'm sorry, I was too eager to answer this question. You know, it's not about it being a crisis. It's already a crisis. We have to agree.
Yeah.
What are we doing towards it? Why is it a crisis? Because climate change is non-discriminatory. Why? Because if a farmer is lacking rains in Germany, we will starve here in Africa. It does not know any borders. It does not know any race. It does not know any territories. Climate change will affect the whole world. You know, despite the ongoing blame game that, oh, US is a major polluter, that China is a major polluter, together they contribute 80% of pollution, global gas pollution, and all those emissions. We as Africa are sadly affected when there is a lack of rain. You know, when we expect short rains, you know, thank God that nowadays, at least, you know, we're in the period of short rains and it's raining. But when we lack short rains, when our cattle are dying, you know, when our yields are low, that is climate change. You know, when it's too hot out, when they say eti ini jua ya mvua, that is climate change, and we feel it in our day-to-day lives, and it's something that we must address. But we need information. I'll tell you, I'll reiterate all these points. We need to be educated because I think the charcoal trade alone employs about 700,000 Kenyans. And you know, it has an annual market of, I think, 427 million in US dollars annually. So automatically it becomes, you know, Kenya's fourth biggest revenue earner. So if you tell them stop using charcoal, these people will be mad at you, Opondo. They'll be mad at you, Francis, because you're taking away their livelihood. What will they use? What will they do to earn? You know? And again, it's this reliance on these carbon-based fuels such as macar, they will stagnate any progress towards a smooth transition. So we need to move away from asking whether it's a crisis. We need to know that it is a crisis, but what are we doing to mitigate this climate change? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Atambo will be coming back with another question just as a follow-up of that. Francis Omolo.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Atambo said. He actually spoke my mind. This is a crisis we have. It's not that we have bigger problems than climate change. When it comes to nature and nature decides to behave weirdly with us, it doesn't matter whether we have a corrupt government. Nature will still deal with us regardless of the fact that we think we have bigger problems. The only thing is we just have all these other problems are shouting louder than climate change. I mean, come to think of it, recently during COVID, we had like a locust invasion that came into the country, all the way from Somalia coming into our country and going all the way to the west, right? Which was as a result of climate change. What were the effects of that? Right now, we have millions of people in Turkana that are facing starvation, and we're trying to figure out exactly how we're going to feed these people, right? So, climate change is a crisis we have at hand. It is a problem we have as a world. Just the fact that the Europeans, the Western, and the Chinese are huge contributors to all these emissions doesn't really mean that we also have to follow the same track so that we can have the same development. The thing is, we face the problems, whether it's from our very own cause, whether we are the cause of the problem or they are the cause of the problem. The fact is, the problem is here and the problem has to be faced. And we have to solve this particular problem. Yes, we have other problems in Africa, but climate change is equally or even greater a problem that we face as Africans, because we are paying the price of, the actions that we probably never did. It's actually the actions of the industrial revolution of other countries, but still we pay the price, and we have to face it, and we have to act up. Yes, we have corruption problems, we have problems with our governance, we have problems with, we have poverty that is imminent in our nation, and starvation. But the question is, even starvation itself is caused by climate change. So climate change is a problem that we have to face. It's a crisis that is here, and we have to face it head on.
Thank you. Paul, on the same?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So I think I'll start out with like a fact that's there. So like the past 7 or 8 years, I believe, consecutively have been the warmest years recorded in a long time, in at least 150 years. So, like, you just need to comprehend that the last 7 consecutive years have been the warmest since yearly temperatures were recorded, or since the inception of it. So, that indicates a certain pattern that we should be wary of. But then again, I understand when people say, especially as a third world, that we have like other fish to fry. So what I'll ask is, at what point do you establish a trade-off? Like, at what point do you balance necessities when they come? So what I mean is this. So like okay, let me use an example. You've taken a loan, you have to pay for your car and you have to pay for your house simultaneously, like a mortgage. So what are you going to do? You're going to pay for your house and reduce the debt, and you're also going to pay for your car with whatever salary you'll get. So you're splitting it evenly according to what is very necessary at the time. Otherwise, one of them will be repossessed, maybe the car, or they'll come and take things from your house or whatever because you've defaulted, on the loan. So it's the same thing. At what point do we direct resources and attention and money and whatever to climate change, not too much at the expense of our immediate requirements in regards to education and feeding the hungry? It can also be said similarly, on the same part, at what point do we direct resources to feeding the hungry, our children, giving our girls like sanitary products and all that, and sex education and all that, but not too much at the expense of dealing with climate to the effect where it might affect our ability to actually deal with some of these things, or to empower our industries, or it might impede our ability to work and actually generate the resources to deal with these problems. So that is where the trade-off comes in. And I think it's about establishing a balance, but realistically, every side is fair in argument when looking at them in a comprehensive way. Yeah.
Mhm. Atambo, you saw your hand up. Maybe before I move to the last question of the day.
Yes, it's what Paul said that had really triggered an idea, or rather, what I've seen in this country alone, actually. You've asked at what point, and I'd also mentioned sustainable development. But let's just give an example of a trigger that caused one of our counties, to go into government and say, we need money allocated towards climate change. We need money allocated every month towards climate change activities. And this is what I call the Makueni County Climate Change Fund. The object and purpose of this fund is to provide funding, for climate change activities, especially those identified in the Makueni County. I did see a powerful story about, a river drying up in rural Makueni, and this river was being heavily relied on, for all activities, even recreational, for cooking, for showering, for drinking. And they did say, what can we do as a government? What can we do as the locals to provide change? So the time is now. We must put money aside. We must put ideas and innovations. We must support them towards these climate change activities. And I think that's the little I can say on that. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe, as you can see, Umkoko is also saying powerful. The panelists are overworking. Africa can indeed lead the green change. Maybe on that same question, is there anyone, maybe I'm looking out, would like to add something before we come to the question of the, I think the question that is bringing us to the end of this conversation? Because I think these are very great conversation and we can never finish it, but we can use this kind of platform just to trigger conversation because we want to take these conversations where they belong actually. There was a question on what message should we give to Mama Mboga? And by Mama Mboga, I hope Mkoko here means, just the message that we have for all the small scale traders in our country, wale wanauza chapati, wanauza mboga, wenye wanapika samosa, wale wenye wanauza chipo mwitu zenye Roslyn anapenda na Upondo anapenda sana. By the way, they taste so differently. Kachumbari ya barabara, mnajua, taste so different from ile umetengeneza home. Wale watu wa mtura, you people love mtura na wajua sana. What message do we have to them? Maybe in a minute or so, each person, just a minute, then we come to the question, the last question of the day.
Okay. The message that would have for Mama Mboga first. Let me use something that we all relate to. Lipa na M-Pesa. I think we all see what Safaricom did to include Mama Mboga by opening that part called Pochi la Biashara, where now they don't have to go for the till numbers and they don't have to have a pay bill. So you see, like such things. So we need to tell them the importance of having climate change as a discussion, as a topic of discussion first, before they even start implementing it. Because you cannot be implementing something you can't even talk about. So we have to tell them that there's a discussion, there's a burning discussion that's directly affecting everything they're doing. And after having that discussion is when other things will follow. We'll start telling them that they'll start seeing the benefits. They'll experience the benefits, what they'll be saving, and with time they'll all embrace climate change. But if we just wake up and start telling them, there's climate change, or it's affecting your vegetables, now you need to go towards this direction, you need to stop doing this, you need to stop throwing that this way, it's going to be so hard for them to understand. So we start slowly we start from the roots, the same way Safaricom started with the M-Pesa thing, then now they narrowed down to where everyone will get to it. We can do the same. We just tell Mama Mboga that there's something called climate change, and we'd like you to have it as a topic of discussion first. With that, we can continue with the other steps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll give one more person just to for a message to Mamboga, then I bring the question that is bringing us to the end of this conversation. I would like to take it. Maybe the first person to turn on his microphone, the city gentleman.
I think I checked that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so because it was a Mukoko's question. I know Mukoko is a learned friend. He really appreciates philosophy, just like me. And I remember one of the things we first talked about with him in regards to philosophy was Plato's allegory of the cave. So what the message of that allegory in short is like, even if you know something and you know that you know something better than a layman or better than someone that has no comprehension of the topic, you don't impose it on them immediately. It's more of a yes, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, but what about this? Then you introduce a small portion of what you want to say, and then they'll object and they'll probably be wrong, but you don't rub it in their face and dismiss it and say, yeah, no, you're totally wrong. You'll say, yes, I understand you again, but what about this? See how it relates to the first concept? It's the same thing here. It's not about going to Mama Mboga and the, hustler, the term that, it has come to adopt here in Kenya. Like, it's not about imposing it on them like that, like this climate change. It's about telling them, like, I understand that this is your source of livelihood, but do you think you can come up with an innovative way of maybe using energy or getting your energy in some other way that is more eco-friendly? Now, talk about eco-friendly, like, what do you mean by eco-friendly to them? You can tell them, you can show them concrete evidence. You can tell them, maybe the climate has been so bad, look at the people that have their small businesses on the shorelines of like Mombasa and whatever. So look at the rising sea levels. A lot of them have had to have their businesses moved. And why is this so? This is because of climate change. Climate change is a phenomenon that has been there for a while. It's been reinforced. You even see the president that probably a lot of you supported, hustlers, talking about it. So you believe in his narrative, in his message. He's talking about climate change. So you can also resonate with that. That's what I mean. Like tiny chunks in a way that will be most effective in pushing the message to a layman. So I think that will go a long way than simply saying change everything because there's climate change. That way you won't get anything done.
Thank you. I have a very special, okay, there's a very special comment here from Tracy Lorraine Mugas. She says, just what on this, yes, we have all agreed we need to educate the people, but how do we tell them? As a filmmaker, we believe in show rather than tell. Let's embrace making documentaries that show the effects of climate change in the communities. Fiction or non-fiction, people are more likely to believe or rather accept something they can visually see its effects. Alex Oburu from Facebook, actually, most of those comments are from YouTube. Alex Oburu says climate change has increased the frequency and magnitude of extreme weather events in Kenya, causing loss of life, diminished livelihoods, reduced crop and livestock production, and damaged infrastructure, among other adverse impacts. So, for everyone who is watching this session now, I'd like you to know the conversation we are having here is brought to you by the Regional Sustainability Network with the Hansel Foundation in partnership with Camp D Voices here. We've been doing these different conversations here, but this time round, we decided to make this happen because it is very important. And we said from the beginning, we are not leaving this conversation to the experts because the planet belongs to all of us. It does not belong to the experts or to the government officials. All our activities are affecting everything directly or indirectly. To the panelists who are in my studio, virtual studio here, now I have just one question for you. Tambu, you mentioned 700,000 people employed in the charcoal trade. So this also comes to the issue of money and source of livelihood. Is there an opportunity, similar opportunity in the green transition? And maybe what can be done, because maybe if we are able to connect money with what we're talking about, the green revolution, that young people are able to see, oh, okay, by doing this, then this kind of innovation, or by participating this way, I can get money, I can do this. Do you think there are such opportunities? And if there are, what then should the government do to make sure that these opportunities are accessible to young people and even just to Kenyans in general, so that we see that indeed there's still money also in the alternatives? As you think about that question, special greetings go to Sirai Primary School and the Wasu Secondary School. We were in a Wasu Secondary School, and some of the students told me they are watching. In fact, right now there's a friend, a teacher by the name Mr. Njoroge, who is telling me that they are in the staff room with 4 students watching on his YouTube, and they're enjoying the conversation. Ewaso Secondary School is in Laikipia County. When we travel to Laikipia County, I think, guys, ladies and gentlemen on this panel, the first time I saw that even animals are now coming out of the parks and all the habitats, and now looking for water, something that was never there before. I saw thin warthogs. Animals have, by just looking at the animals, you can already tell what is happening. We had a conversation at Sirai Primary School, and the children, the school president in Sirai Primary School in Laikipia, who was telling me, actually, that the school president, age 13, and he was telling me that the increased human animal conflict is as a result of lack of what animals need. Like, for example, water. Right now, they have to struggle for the same source of water with elephants and other animals. It has become so difficult even to access water from both sides. When we asked about the possible solutions, the young man was telling us that, it is now time even to start thinking of digging earth for animals in the forest and the jungle, so that they are able to access water, because it is becoming difficult to survive looking at the time that we are living in. So when I hear young people talk this kind of language, it really makes me happy and know that definitely we are on the right path. So Massive greetings to Nosrai Primary School in Laikipia and the Warsaw Secondary School in Laikipia. And they passed a very special message also. But then, did you know what a Warsaw Nero means? Maybe just on a panel randomly. It's very interesting. A Warsaw, Atambo, do you know this? Because actually, someone
Um,
just. Mhm.
this is difficult. Huh? I knew a while ago, but it has something to do with the river, the
Yes,
water.
it's
Is it
actually.
is
Yes,
it
it's
the
actually.
brown waters?
Yes, actually, Ewaso is the river. When Masai or someone tells you that I'm going to an Ewaso, actually, that's what they mean. But now, when you say Niro, so the brown waters, so the river
Uh,
brown waters, actually. Okay, Sawa. Thank you. Now back to you. What can we do so that we are able to see the opportunities that we are talking about, so that even as we run on that from the other side coming to this side, we see similar opportunities of making money, of earning livelihood, employment, and everything at Ambo.
Okay. Again, I'll try to be brief. There's so much we need to do. There's so much we need to do as a country. There's so much we need to do as individuals. But I believe that everything starts from conversation. And the reason why these conversations are important, Opondo and team, this is because it is only through these conversations that can we identify the root causes, that can we identify, these bad patterns that we practice as Kenyans, as global citizens, that we need to change. And it is only then can we find amicable solutions to solve them. We must show this Mamamboga that Stephen mentioned earlier about the importance of sustainability. We should show her through, real life or fictional stories, as Tracy has said, through illustration. We should show them the need for change. We need to show them the bigger picture. We need to show them why there is human wildlife conflict, why we have these natural disasters. I think now it's called Hurricane Ian. We need to show them why children are starving and why it's hot all the time and why it's never raining. We need, after this identification, we need to teach them about sustainable development, because the energy transition is a crucial enabler of this sustainable development and climate resilience as a whole. We need to provide African solutions for African problems. And one thing I have to do is commend our president, who has enabled the lifting of this GMO ban, I think as of yesterday, this 10-year ban on GMOs. This means that, albeit them showing some health problems and many people are campaigning against these GMOs, they say they're not African, they're made in a lab, the genes are modified. At least those people who are starving will have food, you know. At least we can practice and plant drought-resistant crops, pest-resistant crops. Another thing we need to do as Kenyans, we need to support climate innovation. We need to invest in our own initiatives because it is us who are suffering the problem. We can't invest abroad. We need to invest here in these initiatives and startups. For instance, I got the chance to meet a Kenyan lady. She's called Nzambi Mate. I'm sure many of you know her. She came up with the initiative, with a startup, which recycles plastic to make bricks that are even stronger than concrete. The plastic waste is mixed with sand, it's heated and then compressed into bricks. And they're sold even cheaper than these concrete bricks we buy. Why can't we support uh, these innovations? This change is important and it's also somewhat inevitable. And we need to transition before the effects of climate change do catch up to us. It is only then that we as a country can opt to do better. Because now, if you even compare the amount of energy that Kenya gets from renewable sources, that's about 92%, which is high. That's what we reported in the last COP, as opposed to Norway, a country that gets less sun than us, which is 98.4%. That means we have a long way to go. But yeah, thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Atambo. And our social media guy here reminds me that today is the World Teachers Day. To all the teachers who are watching, to all the teachers who are taking these conversations to classrooms, to all the teachers who've always welcomed us to their schools to talk to children, to talk to students. We celebrate you. You are amazing people. You are the true backbone of the society. Wishing you well as you keep educating the community. Let me now go to Paul Muhisa, just also in 2 minutes or less. What are the opportunities available and what can be done to make these opportunities accessible?
Yeah, so some of the things Tambo has said are interesting. Yeah, it's true. Kenya has like a long way to go. Then it made me recall a speech that Uhuru gave in Glasgow. It was last year. It was on COP26. Of course, he was showing how progressivism in regards to climate change in Kenya is high, and he talks about how clean energy and how clean energy is channeled to electricity in Kenya has increased from less than 30 to 70% from 2013 to 2020. He talked about how they've exploited geothermal potential on a large scale, like for over 10k megawatts. That was it per month or per year, you don't know. And then how renewable energy, like 73% of all installed power generation capacities from renewable energy, and 90% of clean sources of like from electricity, like 90% of it comes from clean sources. So let me put it like that. So these are all things he said. Uh, I don't know if you guys are seeing it for ground, or it was for COP, but either way, it shows how far we've come as a country, but we still have a long way to go, because a lot of the problems I think we are facing are of like a bureaucratic nature. Like, yeah, you can say, it's a person, the change starts with a person, and you can make a difference, but also realistically speaking, that makes some wishy-washy stuff. So yeah, it's governmental. It's about the government, rising its aspirations to solve, energy challenges. It's about mobilizing domestic and international capital for innovative financing and in African energy sector. And finally, it's about like increasing African development, like with financial investments in energy and climate financing and the narrative. I think, yeah, that will go a long way.
Okay, thank you. Omol, also in 2 minutes, kindly, 2 or below.
So, yeah, so, okay. You asked about the economic sustainability of people who are totally dependent on, all these
Yes,
fossil
actually,
fuels.
opportunities available in the green transition,
Yes,
so that
yes.
even as we run away from trading charcoal and all the other things we're doing, we can get similar opportunities as a side.
Right. So, as we all know, like energy has become like part and parcel of our domestic life. We cannot really live as normally without energy in our households, and the consumption and demand for energy will constantly grow with time, because number one, the world population is constantly increasing. Even our Kenyan population is increasing as well. Number two, we have new technology that are coming along. More devices are being manufactured, more more gadgets are being manufactured for human consumption, meaning that actually doubles or triples the amount of energy that is going to be needed to run all these devices. When you think about electric appliances, when you think about home usage in our very own houses, the consumption of energy will constantly increase. So when you talk about opportunities, any new market that comes along, and when you think about it, this revolution towards green energy creates new opportunities from manufacturing, and also getting to think about new innovative ways to meet the demand of energy that is going to come along. As business people, there is the opportunity to invest. As individuals, like when you think about the economic evaluation, yes, more
Mhm.
jobs are going to be created when we start investing more and more on green solutions that are coming along. Yes, you can't really stop the charcoal consumption, and you can't tell 700,000 people that stop burning charcoal, yet you haven't offered the solution. So when we invest further on green solutions, when we talk about solar, when we talk about hydrogen, we talk about wind solutions, when we talk about biogas solutions, all these green solutions that we're talking of here, including manufacturing, electric vehicles and such, there are going to be opportunities. There are going to be more jobs that are going to be created for these people. So so more demand in energy means there is more need to supply this energy, meaning that the industry and the sector is going to expand, meaning that there are going to be more opportunities for people to, benefit from this particular transition, from business people, even from individuals who are going to be employed in this particular sector.
Thank you. Asante sana Francis. Rosie, also in 2 minutes, kindly.
Okay, first thing, we need first to create more awareness on what is really happening. You see, like about the COP27 event, not everyone knows what's really going to happen. Not everyone is aware of what comes with the COP27, and not all of us know that there was COP26, there was COP25, and going downwards. So let's look at something like for us to communicate this language of climate change, we should go with something that maybe that attracts many people. Let's say, for instance, and let me just use an example that I'm sure most of us are aware. I guess all of us are aware that we're having the World Cup this year. And better yet, most of us are even aware of the location. And most of us even know the dates. Some even know the teams and the players. So
And
which
the
if we have
substitute of the players.
yeah, and the substitute. So you see, like if we had the same thing for climate change, that the same way we have cultural weeks in our schools, why don't we have climate change weeks? We can start from there. Remember when we were in high school or even primary to now even campus, we still have cultural weeks. If we'd be having the same discussions, we'd be progressing every day, because if we know that every week or even every first 2 days of every month we have to do something on climate change. We have to either educate people, we have to go out there and show them. As someone said that we can even we can involve theater, the acting and everything. So
Mhm.
if we go that way, we say that every month or every 3 months we have to do something on climate change, because with that we'd be creating more awareness, and again we'd be impacting many people at once, instead of having like let's say we're having this discussion. So here we're talking about COP27. I'm sure there's someone who streamed in today who is like, so what's
Okay.
that? Okay, so you mean Egypt also has an event? People get to know so much about events, like right now, and social media is really helping us with that. The spreading of information is very vast when we use social media, you say. So
Okay.
I'd just like us to embrace climate change the same way we're embracing the things we love. For instance, football. Upon I know you're a football lover, yeah. So, for instance, football. Embrace it the same way you're embracing things that you love, not things that you hate. Imagine starting to
Okay.
embrace climate change like corruption. Then we'll be like, it's something normal. We do it every day, so it's no big deal. So maybe if we go the direction of having it in an event where everyone gets to participate, and maybe there are even prizes, the same way people are being awarded for having innovations, we can just be awarded for participating.
Rosie, now I'll
Uh,
have to murife you. I'll have to murife you.
it's okay. Yeah.
Atambo, yes,
Uh-huh.
yes, Atambo, please, because you are the person I gave 2 minutes and I spent 5 minutes.
I'm so
So,
sorry. Now we will take just 1 minute. You can time me. This is again on the opportunities. Just to wind up this question. I think a major problem that we as Africans fear is that job security aspect, especially those who work in these not so carbon friendly, these carbon emitting jobs. They fear that the energy transition will come and leave them far behind. And what we need to do as governments, what we need to do as Africans, as I conclude, is we need to ensure that these people will have jobs even after the transition. That's the
no.
only way that Mama Mboga will accept this transition. Thank you very much.
Asante sana. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we need to turn on the mics. Tujipigie makofi. Let's appreciate ourselves. I think this is the right time always to appreciate ourselves. Day one was started on a very high. The day one participants set some very high standards. I was worried about the day two. They made this the standard higher. Now today again, you've even raised it a bit higher. And I know tomorrow we are finishing in great style. So today we're having a conversation around climate change and energy. And when we talk about energy, we wanted to bring the conversation as simple as tunatumia nini home kupika, tunatumia nini kwa magari zetu, tunatumia nini kutumia lights home, tunatumia nini. I mean, it is from the light that we use in your bedroom to your sitting room to everywhere, the water that you use at home, how is this water pumped, the energy, I mean, what you use at home, in your kitchen, in your offices, in schools, everywhere. That is the conversation that we are having here today. Somebody mentioned a very important point, and that should be, I just want to emphasize, that was Tracy, who said that it's very important to involve people. And again, I would like to bring back the Chinese quote that we used here on Monday, that if you tell me, I'll forget. If you show me, I'll remember. But if you involve me, I will understand. Let's take these conversations home. Let's involve people. Let's engage people on the kind of things that we're talking about. Sometimes you have to engage people in this kind of discussion. Show them exactly what you mean. As simple as telling someone, this is what we mean by conserving water. This is what we mean by conserving energy. This is what we mean by conserving blah, blah. So as we show them, then definitely we know people are going to understand and are going to be excited and get involved in the whole process that we are talking about. I do not know whether Daniel is here. Germany has been mentioned a lot on this conversation. I don't know that Daniel would like to come in and maybe just say something and also maybe just say hello to, as he was here with us yesterday. Unfortunately, he told me not be able to join us tomorrow. He has been following this conversation very closely. He's one of our partners from, representing one of our partners, Handsidle Foundation. Daniel, if you are here, maybe you'd like to turn on your mic and your video preferably and say hello to people. He has chosen. He says he has technical issues, so definitely appreciating the conversation that is going on. Asante sana to all of you, the debaters who showed up for this conversation. You are amazing people. To everyone who was watching, to our team that is ensuring that this conversation is streamed live, running it on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, Alex, Derek, and everyone, wherever you are. To the debaters of day one, day two, and today, day three, day four, we'll be back with yet another great team. What will the conversation all about? Climate change and politics. Today, we are very sorry we've eaten into your 3 minutes. Please don't go away because of that. Tomorrow, we will be back same time, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. East African time, same conversation. Francis Omolo, good night. Jeremy Tambo, good night. Paul Mohisa, good night. And Rosie Omondi, have a wonderful night. To all of you, see you again tomorrow.